Catch your breath. Don't cough. Don't cough. Okay. Let's give myself a leaning point. That way I don't end up leaning away from the camera. I don't want to do. The last man on Earth, that monsters were hunting him. It didn't matter that he was already dead. The beast would never quit. Lightning guided him and the dog through the ruins of the city. They moved through the darkness with calculated. His radiation suit snug around his lean muscles and scarred flesh. The Siberian husky wore a similar suit to protect him. The dog turned to check out a noise coming from a heap. A bottle rolled down the side, bounced and shattered at the bottom. The wind whipped over the crest of the mountain, picking up a tin can and whirling it away in the draft. The man swept his assault rifle back and forth in contact. He couldn't see the creatures, but he could sense them out. Miles trotted on, uninterested. The ground ahead was clear for now, but the path ahead was treacherous. Taking cautious strides over the debris field, the man melted into the passage through the crumpled city block. Blackened metal bruised with rust littered his path. The jagged ends could rip his suit open with ease. He stopped and signaled Miles to halt. The dog sat on his hind legs, and they waited for a flash of lightning to illuminate the path forward. The man knew this route well and had memorized where the main hazards lay, but even so, every step was fraught with danger. A sinkhole, 15 steps ahead, had nearly swallowed him a mile back. 20 steps beyond the pib was a wall of sharp rebar that had ripped his suit twice before. But the biggest danger, aside from the monsters, were the clusters of poisonous weeds growing there. No matter how many times he cut them down with his machete, they would grow back even thicker. Their sting would maim him, but it could kill a dog. A flash of lightning spread its blue glow over the flayed iron ribs of an. The man didn't waste the light. He never wasted the light. He made a quick sweep for hostiles with his rifle muzzle, checked for the lethal weeds, then plodded forward into the belly of the building. Thunder boomed overhead, like a war drum urging him forward. He listened for other sounds, the skittering of clawed feet, worst of all, the otherworldly wailing of the siren. But tonight, he did not hear them. Whatever hunted them was a different kind of monster. He and Miles moved silently through the gutted corpse of an old-world building. Steel girders rose above them, like the bones of a gigantic beast. When he first discovered this place, it had reminded him of the fossils of dinosaurs he had seen in books. Another flash of lightning lit up a pair of real fossils. The remains of two souls rested in the dirt ahead, curled up in the fetal position. The larger skeleton hugged the smaller one, a mother protecting her child from the blast that leveled the city hundreds of years ago. The man tried to feel something at the sight. Memories flooded his mind, but he pushed them away as he always did. Damned men had no right to feel. His old life seemed far away now. He wasn't sure what he had done to deserve such a horrible punishment. Part of him wished he had just died in the sky 2 years ago, fried by lightning, or snatched by the winged hunters. He had Miles, a dog and a dream. That was all he had. They pushed on through the wastes, toward the one thing that kept him venturing out into the darkness. Today was the last time he checked the radio transmissions. If there was no response to his SOS, he would finally leave Hades. For 2 years he had waited to hear something from the people in the sky. 2 years he had scavenged the waste with Miles, in search of food and supplies, to keep them going until help arrived. They had evaded the monsters and fought them when they couldn't run it. Time was hard to measure, especially when he had no idea whether it was night or day. He lived his life in the darkness. He had given up marking the wall of his shelter over a year. As the days turned into the months and the months into years, he had realized that in hell there was no salvation and no escape. If he tried to leave, he would have to abandon their supplies, food, and only source of water. Trekking to the wastes beyond Hades would likely mean death for them. Time was everything, and time was nothing. As it slowly passed, details of his earlier life eroded away like bones turned to dust. The faces and voices of people he had lost became harder to remember. That was, that was how he knew he was dead. His body might still be alive, but the loneliness and isolation had killed whatever remained of his soul. And yet there was still a seed of something human inside the man. Perhaps it was his affection for Miles. He wanted to protect the dog, as he had once protected people. Something else pushed him on through the merciless world that humans had once called home. The man had a strong desire to fight. There was something deep in the marrow of his bones, like a cancer he couldn't kill. Miles stopped before a pocket of glowing bushes. Tentacles with needle-lined suction cups reached out for the dog, and the man motioned him back. The wind swayed the stems dangerously close, and he took another step back. A year ago, he had almost died when one stung his leg. He still had the suction cup scar, yet another badge on his tormented flesh. Raising the rifle, he checked his surroundings again. Awareness was the key to survival. Miles provided keener ears and eyes, but his sense of smell was handicapped by the mask he wore. The man listened, scanned, listened again, then directed the dog onward. The Industrial Tech Corporation bunker wasn't far now, but it was buried deep in the guts of the city. The lightning continued to guide him through the skeletal building. He pulled out his machete and hacked through a bush in their path. The limbs plopped to the ground, wriggling like decapitated snakes. He wiped the gooey sap off carefully, sheathed the blade. It took a slight detour around this clump of weeds. The stems, activated by their presence, blinked alive with a dull pink glow. Like most life forms on the surface, this one was carnivorous. The sky boomed. He glanced up at the swirling soup of clouds and static electricity. The storm was growing. A single raindrop splashed across his visor. One beat later, the clouds erupted, pouring sheets of radioactive acid rain from the city. Miles, scared by the sound of the thunder, brushed up against his lip. The man considered turning back to his shelter, but decided to brave the storm. He was almost to the place where he had discovered Miles. They pressed on, the dog trotting closely along. As they navigated the final stretch of flashing bushes, the glow pulsing over the path was eerie. The sign of life offered a slim hope that that maybe, someday, the surface would thrive. Coffee. Perhaps hell wasn't for eternity. A shocking blast of lightning snapped him back from his thoughts. It arced into a debris pile 3 stories high in the western edge of the open tunnel. Sparks rained down over hunks of brick and spikes of rebar. He took a step forward but halted when he saw movement. Miles saw it at the same time and took a few crouching steps forward that let out a low growl. The man's eyes weren't as good as the dog's, and he had to squint. Rain slammed into him as he waited for light. 3 beats passed before lightning arced overhead and backlit the city blocks. This time he didn't squint. His finger moved instinctively to the trigger, and his dead heart flinched when he saw the creatures hunting them. He had been wrong earlier. The sirens were stalking him all along. Hundreds of them skittering across the mountain. Never in his life has he seen so many. He tried to move, but his aching muscles were frozen. Maybe if they stood perfectly still, the monsters wouldn't find them. After all, he didn't have a battery pack or any other energy source that would draw the beast to him. Swallowing, he watched them stampede right for his position. He couldn't outrun them. He couldn't fight them all. Hades had finally won. Surprisingly, the only sadness he found about his impending death was for Miles. The dog's death would be on him. All at once, the glow of the bushes brightened, flashing from pink to a fiery red, the sirens shrieking louder and higher and hurried onward. The beasts were coming for the plants, not him. Their high-pitched wails rose over the loud clack of thunder. The sound, no matter how many times he heard it, still turned his mind to ice. Miles backpedaled. The man snapped into motion. He ran, boots slogging through the dog lunged through a gap in the concrete, but the man had to stop and flatten his body. He lowered his rifle to squeeze through the narrow space rebar jutted out. He ducked under it. He made it through without any more tears, and kept tears. That's hilarious. And kept running. He leaped over a grove of the glowing weed. His boots hit the earth with a splash and sank into the toxic muck. He pulled free and continued onward. Miles was waiting for him, sitting on his haunches. Breathing heavily now, the man looked past the dog and focused on the tunnel. It opened to a city street, framed on both sides by sagging structures. This was one of the many ITC camps, and the buildings had been constructed to survive the apocalypse. Humans, however, not. The screeching rose into the familiar wail, like an emergency siren. He twisted to see the monsters entering the open tunnel. The bushes growing throughout swayed back, and tentacles groping for the eyeless beasts. He stopped for a moment to watch as the sirens fed, ripping the stems off and jamming the tentacles into their mouth, rimmed with jagged teeth. Heart pounding, he moved back as one of the monsters, still chewing on a stick, turned its head toward him. The leathery, eyeless face locked on it, and it spat out the stem to release a high-pitched call. 24 conical heads all seemed to home in on us. Thunder boomed overhead, as if answering their wails. "Run!" he yelled at the dog. The man felt the trickle of fear, but pushed it away. Planting his boots firmly, he squared his shoulders and fired off a volley into the beast that had first made its position. His aim was true. The rounds punched through the thick skull. Blood darkened the mud as the siren crashed to the ground. He fired another burst, really. He fired another burst that took down 2 more of the beasts to his left. The rest fanned out, some taking to the sky, others darting for cover in the toxic rubble. He wiped his visor clean and turned to run down the street after the dog. He could see the bunker's domed entrance in the distance, but clusters of the poisonous bushes had grown along the path since he was here last. As Miles approached, their stems activated, blinking. "Watch out!" he shouted after them. Miles navigated the plants with ease and galloped down the block, then sat in front of the double door to safety. The man slung the rifle over his shoulder as he ran. He reached for the key in his pocket. Vest pocket, his pocket. It's the same thing. Either which one. Halfway down the street, he turned to fire at a siren, sailing through the sky. It swooped away from his gun and dropped it to a coming right at him. Holding in a breath, he squinted and fired a 3-round burst at his jagged spine. It crashed to the ground like a missile, throwing dirt into the air. Miles was barking now, which drew the creature's attention. Another siren sailed toward the dog. Raising his rifle, the fired 2 bursts that lanced through the creature's leathery. Then he leapt over another toxic bush that graced with the grace of a much younger man. His tentacles reached up for it. One grazed his boot, needle slashing the water. Tip broke, burning his skin. But he breathed through the pain and limped for the doors. He would survive a minor sting as long as he could apply ointment in time. He would not survive the siren. They would dismember him on the spot and fight over his... He had seen it before. Phone is ringing. Who it is, but we busy. You know what I'm saying? You know what? I didn't intend to take a break right there, but the phone rang. A break we are taking. Do that one. We'll do this one. Oh shit! Oh shit! That's hilarious. My man. You better believe there's about to be push-ups, guys. Right in the middle. Right in the middle. And I gotta move this. Do it. Hell yeah. My man, the galaxy. That's awesome. Woo! I see you're still getting down in that Yakuza game. Yeah, man, I haven't really been streaming a whole lot lately. Been doing a lot of random life stuff. I've just been kind of busy. You know what I mean? Honestly, I keep getting wrapped up in books too. I've read I think I've probably read 3 books since the last time I talked to you. Because it's been a second since I talked to you. But it goes that way sometimes. I'm actually reading this right now because I'm going to get the 3rd book, and I just wanted to do a little video on it because I really enjoyed the book. I couldn't put it down. I see. I have seen you playing MLB The Show, now that you say that. God, I got my camera all jacked up. Dropping a deuce! There's only a few pages left in the prologue. But I'll read the prologue to the next one as well. Alright. All right. I think I moved this too. Let's make sure we're good. A memory of an old friend, tried to surface in his mind. But he pushed the traumatic scene away and ran from the monsters. Miles was pacing outside the door, his gaze trained on his master. The man wiped rain from his visor as he bolted for the entrance. He knew the final route better than any other place in Hades. But even with it memorized, he hadn't prepared for the wet asphalt. He hit a slick spot, slipped, and crashed to the concrete. Losing the key in the fall, pain swept across his battle-scarred body. Miles barked and ran toward him, but the man yelled for the dog to get back. Excuse me. He pushed himself up just as a network of lightning skewered a siren in the sky, sending it windmilling to the ground. The smoking creature crashed into a cluster of the bushes. Tentacles clamped on, looping around it. The siren wasn't dead, and it thrashed violently amid the pulsating red stems. Blood splattered, steaming in the cold. The key. Where the hell was the key? The man scanned the ground as the siren twisted in agony. Tentacles plastered to its body like cords hooked into some monstrous machine. The screeching was so loud it made the blood in his ears sing. 50 more steps. That was all he had left to go. Get to Miles. Get inside the bunker. But first, get the key. He focused on the ground, searching desperately. There it was, a few feet away, between him and the dying monster. Tentacles shot out at him as he approached. He parried them with his rifle butt, and then bent down to scoop up the key. Another tentacle whizzed past his arm. A second came from his left, and smacked the visor of his helmet, sticking to the glass. He pulled his machete from the sheath on his thigh, and slashed through the stem. A geyser of green blood jetted into the air. Miles continued barking, frantically now. The man checked the sky to make sure none of the monsters were heading for the dog's position. The trapped lightning struck. Okay, I got all tongue-tied right there. I don't know why. The trapped lightning struck siren stopped struggling and fell on its back, and the vines dragged it into the grasp of other vines, which pulled it into the heart of the thicket. A final shriek followed the man as he turned to run. Behind him, dozens of clawed, naked feet slapped the asphalt or slurped in the mud. Wailing sirens filled the sky, and above the circling creatures there was something else. The beetle-like outline of an airship. Raw memories washed over him like rain. Memories of a time before Miles, before this wretched hell. They filled his mind, and for a beat, Hades vanished, replaced by the brilliant sun. In the distance, the hive was slowly flying away. Even as the balloon had pulled his body upward, his heart had pulled him towards the airship. He had drifted across the sky, hailing Captain Maria Ash over the comms as the helium in his balloon escaped and slowly lowered him back to the ruined surface. But his pleas for rescue had gone unanswered. Lightning filled the cloud that he had mistaken for an angel. Behind him, a siren screamed. He pulled his blaster from his hip and shot a flare into the galloping beast. The brilliant red light blossomed out across the street, and the monsters darted away. Glow. He holstered the gun, grabbed his rifle, and fired bursts at the retreating sirens, then turned back towards Miles with the key in his other hand. The dog trotted up to greet him, but the man pointed and yelled, "Inside!" He unlocked the door, and Miles darted through the opening. In a fluid sequence of movements, the man shouldered his rifle again, turned and squeezed off shots at the encroaching monsters. The flame was still coughing fire into the street, but there wasn't much light left, and he didn't waste it. He fired a burst near the creature, making a run for the door. Rounds punching through its skull, making 2 neat holes where the eyes should be. Another siren took its place. He sent it spinning away with 3 quick shots to the torso. He leaned into the recoil, picking targets in the waning light. Blood pooled on the ground, and fallen bodies formed a perimeter around the ITC bunker entrance. Behind them, the tentacular arms of the bushes swayed back and forth like dancing flames of barking filled the passage behind him as he fired round after round. "Hold on, Miles, I'm on my way." The bolt locked, open, carbine safety chamber. He was reaching for another magazine. A torrent of lightning connected with the steel girders down the street. Dozens of skeletal, leathery bodies moved in the flickering downpour. There were too many to fight. It was time to flee. Lowering the carbine, he shouldered the door shut and barred it from the inside. He flicked on his precious tactical light, shined it down the staircase, and loped down to a hallway below. "Behind me!" he said to Miles. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Coffee. The push-ups. The intensity of the moment. Behind me, he said to Miles. The dog trotted after him along the narrow passage that stretched under the ITC campus. These derelict arteries connected to the basement of buildings designed to survive the apocalypse, though many had since caved in. The man rounded a corner with weapon raised, but the beam from his light revealed an empty hallway. He knew this passage better than any other. The 5 doors all led to different rooms, and in the first was a space that had been airtight until he opened it to discover food, water, and medical supplies designed to last 500 years. When he first found this place, he had been dying from blood loss and radiation poisoning. The discovery had saved him to the extent a dead man could be saved. The second door opened onto an armory containing guns of all kinds, ammunition, equipment, and radiation suits for dogs as well as children. One of the smaller suits, with a bit of alteration, had fit Miles well enough. He passed the third door at a jog. It was a vault containing every seed that humans would have needed to start again on the surface. The man had spent many hours reading on each strain, carried several of the sealed packets with him, though he wasn't sure why. Fruit trees couldn't grow without the sun. The 4th floor, marked by a sign that read cryogenics, was sealed. That was where he had found Miles a year ago, suspended animation inside one of the chambers. When the man first came upon the space, he hadn't known what cryogenics meant. But when he took the elevator down and saw the silo of chambers, he understood. Humans, as well as animals unlike he had ever seen, filled the capsules. Thousands upon thousands of them were hooked up to the backup power that would last another 250 years. But not all of them were preserved. An entire section of chambers was open, but several other sections had been destroyed. Whatever had broken into or out of the chambers was long gone by the time he arrived. Man was not a god. However, no matter how lonely he got, he never unfroze any of the others. But when he saw Miles suspended in cryosleep, he couldn't resist unfreezing him. He was a Siberian husky. Like the dogs on the airship the man had once called home. But the man had quickly realized that Miles was different from them. It was as if he had been designed to survive in hostile conditions. He could tolerate high doses of radiation. His sharp senses had saved him from monsters more times than he could count. Miles ran ahead towards a blast door at the end of the hallway. By the time the man got there, the sirens had found the door at the street above. The beasts pounded on the steel with their lead fists. It wouldn't hold long, but the blast door would buy some extra time. It would also seal them in. And the only other exit was a highly radioactive crawlspace. If their suits were uncompromised, they would live. If there was even the smallest tear, they would die. He fumbled in his pocket and inserted it in the door, then used all his strength to push it open. Miles hurried inside. Raising his gun, the man raised the light over a room furnished with metal tables and desks. Radio equipment, flat-screen monitor, no longer worked, awaited users who would never arrive. He closed the door with a grunt, looked at it, and hurried over to the only working radio. The man leaned down and turned the knob. Static crackled from the ancient speakers as he scanned the channel for transmission. But just as in all the other attempts, he heard nothing but static. No voices, no hint that there might be another human soul out there. A high screech sounded from the hallway. Excuse me. And Miles let out a low growl. The monsters were here. They had never made it inside before. He didn't have much time. He turned the knob slowly, straining his ears for any sound. A chorus of wailing sirens drowned out the voice, and he leaned closer to the speaker. No one had responded to his SOS. He bowed his head, feeling defeat. 2 years he had sent his message out over every frequency, and for 2 years he had listened to silence. Help wasn't coming. There was nothing left for him. Leaving meant abandoning the supplies that had kept him alive. Staying meant he would never see another human again. Any conflict in his icy heart fell away. It was finally time to leave this cursed place. Finally, time to leave hell. He had always wanted to see the ocean. Maybe, in a few more years, he could make it there. Come on, boy, he said to Miles. The dog whined as if he understood. Tried to wag his tail, but the ill-fitting radiation suit hampered his. The sirens slammed into the blast door. the electronic whines echoing through the space as he recorded his final dispatch from hell. If anyone's out there, this is Commander Xavier Rodriguez. I'm leaving Hades and heading east towards the coast. I don't know why my dog freaked out right there. How fucking fitting was that?